Happy holidays! Sometime during the holidays that we're on a break in any case. And we have been counting down the best movies of the decade. And here we are, Spencer Gilbert. We're at the sweet, sweet end.
We made it.
We made it, Joe Starr.
We did it. To the present.
Yeah.
Sort of. We're playing with time every single episode. Dan Murrell, but here we are, 2018, 2019. We're going to start with 2018. Picture this. Avengers Infinity War is at the top of the box office. Green Book wins Best Picture. Highly controversial win, actually, as we were talking about it just now.
I also like your news lady character. She's not a traditional news lady. I appreciate her.
Where would she be hired?
I don't know.
Jersey or Jersey?
At a very local
MTV
TV
News in the 20s?
It's basically a very local TV station just in Queens. Like, it only broadcasts to Queens. So this is the year 2018, very recent. Lots of good movies, actually, that year, a lot of which you guys have picked, and I'm excited to talk about, starting with one that I absolutely loved, advocated for. This was on one of my top 10 of the year that year. Actually, most of these were. Cold War. I love this movie, Spencer.
Yeah, I saw this on your recommendation, Roth.
Oh, good. I think I wanted the credit. I think that's what I was leading up to.
You got it. Yeah, credit well deserved, because, man, this movie's so good. It's kind of a turnoff for a lot of reasons, because it's black and white. It's in Russian, Polish, something like that.
Well, they're in Poland, and then they go to Paris. And
it's a foreign film, and it opens with about 5 minutes of a old-timey traditional Eastern European folk song, like just the performance of that. So, it's really going to put you off.
You're really selling this.
Right off the bat, you're going to be like, oh boy, what have I gotten myself into? But stick with it. It's only 88 minutes long. It's short, it's trim, and this movie, despite the name, it's Cold War, but it's a hot romance. Ooh, it's a hot one. This is a couple divided by politics and the times that they're in, who it follows them throughout the course of their life as these chance meetings, and some intentional, some chance, and just the passion explodes between them when they're together. Ooh, they want each other, but they can't. They're kept apart by political affiliations and just the shifting of history. It reminds me a bit of like the Before trilogy, but Russian, so sad and awful, but with an undeniable attraction between two very good-looking people, kept apart by circumstance that they overcome in various ways, and it's got a classic, we'll say, Russian ending to it.
Chernobyl?
A romantic Chernobyl, if you will.
It's also kind of an examination of the Cold War, too. It is, and baked into this relationship.
Right. The history. It's the crisscrossing of romance and history, which is a combo you don't. I guess you see it in these great historical epics, like. But the American versions are like Titanic and something like that. This is like the real. These people are not. These aren't fancy people. These are people under the boot of history. They're not making history here.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah, you did a better job of selling it than I did, and you pointed out all the things that may turn people off.
Just get over the first 5 minutes. You'll be in.
I actually love it. I think it sets you up perfectly for the rest of the movie.
Well, yeah, I will say about the music, because they're both, I guess, in the music industry. They're kind of like they start out like collecting these disappearing folk songs. That's why you're stuck there at the very beginning. But the music evolves with the times. There's time jumps, and then it turns into like jazz. It turns into modern pop and stuff like that. So I actually thought that was a really cool way that the movie progressed, was musically as well.
Right, because it's like music is reflecting the culture and the times and their relationship and the evolution of their relationship and their hotness.
Their hotness.
Cannot be understood.
Joe Starr, there was a very strange, very great movie that came out in 2018. We spoke to the director here on SJU. Sorry to bother you, but I need you to talk about your movie right now.
I'll do it. This is Boots Riley. You guys did have a great interview with them. Yeah. It's super worth seeking out and watching. I said it when I saw it, but I wish I had seen Sorry to Bother You when I was 18, 19, you know, that when you're first soaking up movies like in a big way for the first time, like those really crazy ones that are really going to stick with you. Like, it makes
the Boondock Saints.
Yeah, you know, the Boondock Saints. You know, it really makes me wish mine hadn't been Donnie Darko. But it was. Here we are.
Yeah, it's true.
Sorry to Bother You is starring Lakeith Stanfield. It starts with a guy who just gets a telemarketing job. And much like in one of these videos, at some point for a minute, at some point recently, I don't know, we've done 106 pre-tapes. We talked about Cabin in the Woods and the idea of escalation and not knowing where that escalation is going to take you. And Sorry to Bother You is a pure exercise in escalation and absurdity, and using those things to examine social issues. And every time you kind of sit back and you go, this is what the movie is, the movie goes, no. We're like halfway there. Tessa Thompson's fantastic in this movie. Armie Hammer, this is my favorite supporting role of the year. He's phenomenal in this as a weird, like, kind of like startup.
Oh yeah, it's a type.
Tech bro-y, like...
He's the guy who ran WeWork and Mark Zuckerberg and Peter Thiel and all these guys.
Yeah, and Dr. Frankenstein, kind of all rolled into one cocained out.
I said Peter Thiel.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Man, I love this movie. It's so weird. I think about it all the time. If you have the opportunity to just watch this movie on a plane, so that the people around you are forced to every now and then look over to see, because everyone wants to know what everybody's watching on the plane, and if every now and then they go from watching guy in a cubicle taking calls to the third act of what this movie is, like chef's kisses, you've given them an experience.
You can traumatize some.
I think
poor child.
Make sure there's not a kid in the row behind you.
Yeah. Or no, they gotta learn sometime. They gotta learn.
No, not like that. Not like that.
Not like
I think
Not like
you
this.
saw this first, right?
Yeah.
So Spencer saw this first, and he comes back and he says, "Oh, there's something that you're going to have to accept in the movie, and if you accept it and you go with it, you're in." And I thought that happened very early on with some voices, and I thought, this is fine. What's the no?
There's a
There was a
escalation,
much
like you
bigger
said.
ask.
Yeah.
Both my movies this year are actually ones that I sought out specifically because of this table. You with Sorry to Bother You, and then the two of you with my other one. So thank you, this table, for my 2018.
Yeah, Sorry to Bother You was great. That was one of my favorites of the year as well. And also there were a bunch of, this was not a documentary. This was maybe the opposite of what a documentary is, Sorry to Bother You, but there were some great documentaries that year, and you picked one that I loved.
I did. Free Solo, the thrill ride of the decade. Yep. Oh my God. I've seen this movie, I think, 3 times now, and every time, even though I know how it ends, it's just the clammy.
It still feels possible that it could go a different way.
Exactly, like my palm starts sweating. Even watching it at home, if they ever show it in a theater, go watch it near you. But also, it's on Disney Plus. And I'm sure other places too. So you can watch this movie. It is so incredible. It's about this climber, Alex Honnold, who does free solo climbing, which basically means you're by yourself, no ropes, if you fall, you're dead. That's it. And he wants to be the first person to free climb El Capitan at Yosemite Park, and it's basically his journey of attempting to do that. But it's weird. The thing with documentaries, and I again with all these pre-tapes, I think I've mentioned this before, but I don't even. It's all a fog. But
we're playing with time and multiple realities.
There's this idea of fate sometimes, where with you're a documentary filmmaker, sometimes you start making a movie and you don't know what that movie's going to turn out to be, and like just fate sometimes will smile on you, and you get this story that you didn't anticipate, because like in the middle of this guy Alex, who's like just the ultimate loner, like just lives in an RV and eats out of the same dish every day, like meets someone. And so like now he has to he's trying to do this thing at the same time. He's like, for the first time, like he's got this serious relationship going on. There's like somebody else who's just like wrapped up in this, and he's not just running off to climb. He has to think about how someone else feels. And there's this counterpoint where it's like he's trying to free climb this rock, but he also has to go apartment hunting, and it's like you can tell he's not really comfortable with it. It's just such a
that's the harder thing for him to do.
It is. That's harder for him. It seems like to go apartment hunting than to free climb this huge beast of a rock. But the last half hour or so is like they record his attempt to climb El Capitan, and it's just like it's oh my God. The cinematography was not nominated for an Oscar. Should have won. but it's a documentary, and that's just how it goes. Just like Apollo 11's not going to be nominated for Best Editing this year when it should be. This documentary is viewed in a different way than other movies. But
Won a lot of Emmys.
What's that?
Won a lot of Emmys.
It won so many Emmys. Yeah. Which good for them.
Yeah.
It is so good, so good. Go watch it. Go watch it right now. You can.
After this video.
Pause this video, go watch Free Solo,
And then come back here. Yeah.
Yeah, that movie is harrowing to say, but yeah, I think it is better on the big. This one, it really is better on the big screen. It's kind of too bad if you didn't see it that way.
Yeah, but it's I watched it with my mom on the small and even on the small screen, it's just like, ooh, just it's just the idea, it's the concept. It's almost like body horror, except it's like not someone's body transforming, it's you imagining your body being in that situation.
Especially the filmmaker and the climber, they were best friends, and they talked about it pretty open, or close friends, and they talked about it pretty openly. Imagine putting yourself in a position where you feel like you might inadvertently be responsible for your friend making a choice because they know they're being filmed that they're not totally comfortable with, and that could end in their death. That's a lot on a filmmaker.
It's a lot.
But it's a great movie. Another documentary that came out in 2018 is Won't You Be My Neighbor, about Mr. Fred Rogers. I love this movie. The filmmaker's name is Morgan Neville, and I think I've talked about this before, but what's so impressive to me about him is he did another movie for Netflix called The Love Me When I'm Dead about Orson Welles. And both movies feel exactly like their subjects. It's so, I don't know what this, I would love to talk to him just to see what his perspective is, because there's obviously very famous documentarians that have a very specific style, and you can always tell that it's their film. What was cool for me about these two experiences is I never would have been able to tell you that this was the same filmmaker, because he was so tapped into a subject in both movies, and he gave you such a feeling of being what it was like to be them. Like, the Orson Welles film is crazy and chaotic, and there does feel like there's this like weird genius or madness line that he's writing the entire time, and he's talking about a film that wasn't previously released. Won't You Be My Neighbor, conversely, I wasn't a huge Mr. Rogers person growing up. Judge me if you will, that's fine. So I didn't go in with any sort of preconceived notion or sense of sentimentality about the topic. What was amazing to me, and it always is to be able to communicate a life that was so sincere and so heartfelt and so legitimately interested in people being just slightly happier and more comfortable with themselves. And that's his whole, children in particular. But that was his whole life's mission. And the fact that this one was able to capture that and be moving and compelling and not at all feel saccharine, I think is an incredible achievement. And I think it meant a lot to people that loved Fred Rogers. And I think it meant a lot to people that maybe didn't have as much of an attachment. I don't know if you guys were Mr. Rogers kids.
Yeah, definitely.
You were?
Mr. Rogers kid.
Actually, I wasn't. I was like I was in like an electric company.
Nice. That's also good.
Same channel, different time, though.
Yeah.
But it's a good observation that the documentarian matched his subject, because the documentary it does have sort of an unhurried, comforting, welcoming rhythm to it. It's
Casually changing its shoes for 90 minutes.
Exactly. It is a casual shoe change into
But with
something
a lot
more
of
comfortable.
messaging in that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean to say that it's slow. I mean, it does reflect the experience of hanging with Mr. Rogers.
It does, and if you see The Love Me When I'm Dead, it absolutely is not paced that way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's psychotic almost, but it's great, really compelling.
A bonus documentary, not from 2018, but that you can find just thinking of PBS and childhood icons. Carol Spinney, who played Big Bird forever, who passed away very recently. There's a documentary, I don't know where you can find it, I believe it's called I Am Big Bird, that's about him, and it's also really good. So in the same genre of childhood heroes learning more about and getting to know who they are, and that's also a very good one. You can seek that out.
I think there was a cynical part of all of us that thought eventually something really bad would come out about him, which is terrible to say about Fred Rogers, which is so terrible to say. But no, I think he really he was that guy, and he believed he believed that we should allow for mistakes. I mean, there was nobody that captured the idea of it's okay to be human better than him. Yeah. He allowed for mistakes, he allowed for things to take the time that they did, and he thought everything was far too rushed, which I agree. Speaking of which, hurry up and talk to me about The Favorite.
Oh, okay.
Lorgus.
Yeah. Lorgus or Yorgos?
Yorgos.
Logos. I give up.
Yorgos Lanthimos, and I just combined. I made him date himself.
That's good. You shipped his first name and his last name.
I shipped him with himself. It's about self-love. There was a whole message in it, Spencer.
Yeah, self-love. Okay, so he's
not in that movie.
Yeah, right. He directed but did not write this film, which I thought was actually kind of refreshing, because his screenwriting style, if you've seen any of his other movies, is, let's say, formal. And even though this took place in court, it kind of had I don't want to say timeless, but like a modern feel to it. I guess I do have a type, and that type is people pretending to be the underlings of the privileged to, in some way, con them out of their fortune.
Oh, we'll be talking about that soon.
Yes, and I already mentioned it in The Handmaiden.
Yeah.
So this is another film in that weird subgenre that I guess speaks to me on some level. Surprise! I've been lying. I'm a hobo. But the favorite is Emma Stone at her best. I've never seen her be like kind of devilish or evil or in any way cunning. She's always been, the teen sweetheart or like the adorkable kind of guy's girl and stuff like that. She is so fantastic in this movie. And Olivia Colman, my God, what an amazing portrayal is Queen Elizabeth, I think it was. Anne, yes, whose portrayal of just someone kind of unwound by grief and isolated by privilege, and has a lot of fun with it. And all my Peep Show heads already knew about her from as Sophie from Peep Show, the true greatest performance of greatest comedy of the decade. But this is a close second. It's twisty, it's turny. It's all, I'll say, female forward, and how women can jockey for power in a world kind of set up by a patriarchy, the way they're forced to the sidelines and yet can still use different manners to exert influence, and yet it doesn't have many positive things to say about that power, because everybody is trying to screw everybody else, and I found it delightful. It's my favorite movie of the year.
And shout out to Rachel Weisz too, who plays, you have Queen Anne on one side, who's just manic and kind of trapped in being queen, and her own health and everything else, and then Emma Stone, who's just kind of scheming and plotting, and it's not always the most showy role to be like the person in the middle who's trying to hold everything together, but Rachel Weisz does so well in that role of just like, and her mounting frustration as it goes on, of just being like, no, don't you see, like it's that thing of just like, you're the only sane person and everyone else is crazy, which makes you crazy and everyone else sane, which is this weird thing that's fun to play with in a movie.
And she's
like
go ahead.
I mean, she's great because she's like she opened the genie's lamp or spilled she's the sorcerer's apprentice, because she brings Emma Stone into that world, and then she kind of creates the monster, or doesn't create the monster, but she lets her loose.
It in.
She does, but it's kind of like got a Littlefinger Varys vibe to me, because Emma Stone is very much Littlefinger, and I think Rachel Weisz, you initially meet her and you think she's just as cunning and she's just as self-serving, and then I think towards the end of the film you feel differently about her, that she actually, whether she was right or whether she was wrong, what she was doing was well intended, and for a purpose outside of herself. And
that was her big mistake.
And that was her big mistake. But not only that, but that she and Anne, who actually really have great love for each other, are too stubborn at the end of the day to reconnect. And it's so good when it comes to those dynamics and relationships. Annihilation.
Hey.
Oh, hi. That's it. That's my whole setup for you.
Anyway,
just the word annihilation.
I watched this because you guys were very upset that you couldn't see it on a big screen, and I said,
well, we got to. We were upset that you couldn't.
So you're upset most people couldn't.
I'm still upset. I saw it on a tiny screen, the smallest possible. Wasn't even a phone.
I watched this on a laptop.
It was it was on my Apple. It was on a phone for ants.
How many people watch movies on their Apple Watch, do you think?
Can you?
I don't know.
There it is.
Yeah, that's what that was like. Thank you.
The way it was meant to be.
That doesn't tell you anything. God damn it.
I love this movie, man. This is Alex Garland. He did Sunshine, which is another one of my all-time favorite sci-fis. He wrote 28 Days Later. He did Ex Machina. If that doesn't tell you enough about what to expect from a Garland film, I don't know what else to tell you. This is a sci-fi meditation on grief and sadness and the nature of being. It's got a little bit of body horror. It's got a little Lovecraft in it. In some weird ways, it feels like The Grey to me. You remember that movie? Another similar, we're walking around in this weird place that wants to kill us and thinking about what the nature of what it all means is.
So interesting.
They connect to me in a couple of weird ways. I didn't love this movie when the credits rolled, and then I could not stop thinking about this movie, and then I kept watching this movie. It's beautiful and it's scary and it's screwed up. It's craft-wise, everyone knows exactly what their job is in this movie. There's, in the best way possible, there's no one who stands out because they're not supposed to. Like, I feel like everyone is from a utilitarian angle, everyone's just like, yeah, I will do A, B, and C to the best of my ability and no more. Because I think if any more than that, you almost hurt the movie a little bit. But Portman's awesome. Tessa Thompson is incredible. The visuals in this movie are fantastic. There's the one big scare everyone was talking about was not even the scariest thing in the movie to me. Some of the other sort of quieter ends, shall we say, for characters really sat with me even more than the big scare sequence. But yeah, man, I love this movie.
So good. The other thing I thought I was really addressing was just identity very directly.
Sure,
but
yeah.
every transformation that occurs for every character is based on their kind of like core hang up. You know, whether it's addiction or whatever it is. I love that movie, and it did not get as much love as.
Well, there's
it got dumped off to. I don't mean dumped off, but it got sold to Netflix everywhere except for here.
Well, it was ahead of its time in the streaming wars because now I feel like they're trying to show a lot more love to movies that are being put out on streaming. Yeah, if it was in the Dolomite age, everybody would love Annihilation. But at some point in the past 20 years, in one of these videos, we talked about son of a bitch, just lost it. Squid talking. Arrival. Thank you. Squid talking.
Watchmen.
Yeah.
Arrival.
Your mother, your father, your squid talk. And I think there's an interesting contrast between Arrival and Annihilation in that Arrival is a lot about us needing to understand each other. The alien creature sort of wanting to form some kind of connection and understanding, and there's something so cool in the worst way possible. Like there's something so like Lovecraftian and Cthulhu-esque about Annihilation of no, this has no interest in you in the way that you understand interest. It's cold. It has its own agenda. It's
Really?
Above you.
I mean,
it's connected to her, but it not.
Did she fight herself at the end?
She sure did.
No. I think that's really interesting because that's the exact opposite perspective I have because mimicking is really, really like an empathic response.
Mm-hmm.
You want to connect to someone, so you might pick up an accent or you might pick up a mannerism, like unconsciously, because you just want to connect with them. But also, I think in order for anything to progress, you got to kill your past.
Right. But I think what's interesting is that we don't get a why. Like even with the squids in Arrival, like I'm kind of like I want to hug those squids. I like the way they write. I like the way they want to be my friend.
In the future, I think is the premise.
It's actually fairly self-serving on the part of the squids.
Yeah.
It's because they know we're eventually going to.
Typical squid.
Typical squid behavior.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Classic.
But that's really I think that's awesome that you saw it a completely different way because that's like the mark of a good movie in a lot of ways.
Yep.
I think.
Annihilation.
Rock on.
I have spoken.
Oh, you have spoken. Very good. A movie that it would have been a shame to not see in the theaters. One of the better comic book movies, in this woman's opinion, in the last few years, is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
And I didn't give animation a lot of love on this list, and there have been some great animated movies, but man, do I love Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And it's there's so many times, Roth, we talk about it all the time, where a movie comes out and you're really rooting for it. And 9 times out of 10, you know, some people will give it its just desserts, but most of the time it goes underseen until, you know, it catches on later on, etc. Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse is one of those that, you know, it came out literally right on the heels of Venom. So people had already gotten, you know, and you had a Spider-Man movie coming out, and Spider-Man was in Infinity War. So what Spider-Man, you know, box office wise, when it came out, people kind of shrugged as far as like rushing out to see it. And, you know, critically, I think all of us that saw it, you know, were just like, no, like this is something different. This isn't just another Spider-Man thing. And what was so fun to see it was to watch it over the weeks that followed, like stick around. You know, it wasn't a box office sensation, but it stuck around. You know, it did all right. And then to watch it like build with the awards season and it's that awards show underdog that, like, again, you're usually always rooting for and they never win, and then it started winning, and it's watching this movie that you love finally start getting its due, because it deserves every bit of it. Outside of the Spider-Man mythology, I think it's still a great movie, and I don't think you need to be a Spider-Man fan to like it or enjoy it. It's just a great story. It looks incredible. Like that kind of animation, you know, it could have come off as cheap, but the way that they do it, the style that it has, it's so unique and so beautiful. It's just a gorgeous movie. It's hilarious. It's touching. It may be my favorite Spider-Man thing, like of all of them that have ever come out. I think it might be that movie, and then there's some hefty competition, but I just think that it so nails what it means to be Spider-Man and what that hero is all about, while at the same time being able to break out of the mold of Peter Parker, Uncle Ben, bitten by a spider. You know,
it makes fun of it a little bit.
It does. Yeah. It makes fun of it. But it really is, when people talk about being able to reinvent a franchise, that is what I would point to, because they figured out a way to tell the story in a different way, in a way that's self-referential, that's funny, but that doesn't disarm any of what's special about it. It's so good. It's so good, and I'm glad that the momentum won out, and that it did get its just desserts. And I think as far as an audience and a box office goes, you're going to see a much different story when the sequel comes out. I think in a couple years, but it's one of the few superhero movies where I'm like, I want more of that. I want you to make a sequel to that, because I just love this so much.
Well, it's true art with being made out of a very like commercial property, which is incredible. Not just subject wise, but like approach, the way that the studio just sat back and said, yeah, do your thing. Like, because animation in the US has a very house style. Everything looks a little, for the most, obviously there's exceptions here and there, but for the most part, everything looks a little Pixar-y. Everything is arching its eyebrow and going, what, me? And the fact that not only were they going to say, okay, yes, you can do an animated Spider-Man project. It does not have to be in a continuity or attached to the MCU or attached to the Venomverse or whatever. And you can adapt the Spider-Verse story from Marvel Comics. You can do whatever you want. You can Deadpool it. You can meta it. You can comment on Spider-Man itself. The fact that the studio just sat back and someone at Sony was like, understood what they had. It just seems so rare, and I love that we got this movie. It's so good. It's a work of art.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Agree with both of you for all of the reasons you said. Also a work of art that Joe and team worked so hard on is the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse on a trailer, which you haven't seen it. You should check that one out too.
It's a weird one.
Patton Oswalt called that a work of art.
He did.
Do you remember that?
Thanks, Pat.
That was so great.
It's very nice.
Okay, I'm going to quickly mention a couple of movies that I think we all like instead of doing one big one. One is Shoplifters, and you and I have talked about this so much, but there's always another opportunity to advocate for Shoplifters.
Yeah.
This small film about what it means to be a family, and also a little bit of class distinction, which we're going to get into more in some of our other films. But say a word or two about Shoplifters, because I love that movie.
Oh man, it's so good. I hesitate to say too much about the plot, because there are some reversals and some reveals that I think might take away from it. But it really is about what makes a good family and what's important in your closest relationships. And also the kind of like the Florida Project, it's like a non-exploitive look at like the crushing unfairness of being born on the margins of society or born into poverty and stuff like that. And it shows you a way out of that or a way to transcend that, which is through family, or at least the roles that people play that are familial.
Yeah.
I don't want to say too much more about it than that, but it's beautiful. It's touching. It's one of my favorite movies.
Me too. And I can't recommend it enough. If you guys haven't seen Shoplifters yet, please do check it out. It is beautiful, all of those reasons. It's touching on not only if you were born into poverty, but find yourself there, because it's dealing with a time period of extreme recession. So check it out. Please do that. It's full of heart and great performances too. Another one that I loved that year, that we loved, I think we can direct you to an hour of us talking about Hereditary, which is a lot of horror films deal with family trauma at their core. And I think this one does it just about as well as you possibly can do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've literally said everything that I can say, but I will always hashtag an Oscar for Tony. Shamefully robbed not only of an Oscar, but of a nomination. Yeah, I think that was both of our favorite movie last year.
Was.
And I've revisited it a few times since then, and it remains one of my favorite movies ever.
Yikes. That's the image we chose. Okay.
Yeah.
It's compelling.
That's compelling.
That's her finding out she was not nominated.
That's us finding out she was not nominated.
Exactly. Ari Aster and you know, Midsummer I enjoyed, but this movie to me was on another level. I think it is a work of art in many places, and Toni Collette is so effing good.
She really is. She really is. And it starts with, it utilizes what she does for a living in terms of she makes these dioramas. Notice that when you watch the movie again and what he's saying when he's utilizing these particular dioramas.
One of the most
he basically
rewatchable
sets up the
movies.
whole movie in this one opening shot, which is pretty amazing. Every theme is in this one shot, which I think he does again actually in Midsummer. But we'll talk about that at a different time. Really quickly, I'm going to tell you guys about one that I don't think I convinced enough people to watch just yet, but it's called The Guilty. This is a Danish thriller, and it's really, really incredible. We talk about pure cinema, and there's something like Annihilation that's incredibly visual. This is pure storytelling, because so much of it is just in your imagination. It's incredibly contained. It is one man who's a police, he's a dispatcher, so he takes the calls, and he gets a call from what appears to be a kidnapped woman, and their relationship, he is on a race against time. It's happening in real time as he wants to try and find this woman and get her out of the situation, but more is to be revealed about what's actually happening. And this is adding a layer to that. He's on somebody who's usually an active policeman but is on suspension for an act of violence. All of that sort of plays out over in real time, and in this very contained setting that's almost entirely one actor. You hear the others, and in one room. So that's very, very hard to do and make a very compelling story. It does that. Since Spencer did it earlier, I will warn you that it's in black and white, but that shouldn't bother us. That's okay, man.
There are parts of SpiderVerse that are in black and white.
That are in black and white,
There's a whole
too.
black and white character.
It's really, really great. If you want to see what it is just to tell a story and allow the audience to use their imagination to fill in all the gaps and to walk away incredibly shattered, watch this movie, The Guilty. Good. On that cheerful note, the year was 2019 and we were in it right now. We don't know some of these answers yet about what's going to win for Oscar yet. We have no idea. And we don't really know, Dan, yet. We can't totally call, I guess we can kind of call Avengers Endgame, talk about the box office.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think we can safely... What would happen in the next 2 weeks to unseat
The two popes.
I mean, Star Wars.
Star Wars.
But it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I think we can safely call Endgame.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
It made
Oscar,
some
we don't
money.
know yet, but that's what we're here to predict.
The two
to some
Jokers.
degree. The two Jokers.
Which is my smash of the two popes and Joker. Can you do that? I don't know if there's
The
a
Two
rule.
Popes is really good. I swear to God, it's really good. I was shocked. I really enjoyed it. I
didn't hate it.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't dislike it either.
I
liked
liked it a lot.
Sounds like the setup to a joke.
Yeah, the two
Really-
popes.
Look,
Popes walk into a bar.
I was like, do I want to see this movie? And then I saw a tweet that just said, young pope, two popes, red pope, blue pope. And I was like, that's all I need. I'll never see that movie.
Spencer Gilbert's repping Netflix. This episode brought to you by Netflix. Marriage Story is the first one of your Netflix
Well,
picks.
we had I mean, real quick, just looking at this, I think we had another confusion where I picked Parasite, but you had already picked Parasite, but then we had something. So I'll just mention quickly, Parasite, it's a family pretending to be someone they're not to infiltrate a rich family. Ooh, you know I like those ones.
Yeah.
I like those movies.
It's your genre.
I still put it below The Handmaiden, but it was good to get another one like that this year. I really liked it.
But it's all, yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
That said, I will discuss Marriage Story, but another preamble. I haven't seen enough of the good movies this year because they all come out in November, December.
These are two really good ones.
And I've been very busy. So I will say Marriage Story, even though like
a dad.
not being a dad, just this is when I do my catch up every year.
Fatherhood.
for all the prestige stuff.
Yes.
Is there any thing more prestigious than being a father, though?
Thank you. What was I gonna say?
Marriage Story.
Yeah, it's a good film.
You're thinking about your kid. And
Well, yeah, I was thinking about divorce and all that fun stuff because it's like the Boyhood of divorce. You're just watching a divorce unfold in real time, and man, do you feel like you are in it. It is very unpleasant, but very admirable for its acting and its unflinching honesty during a very difficult time. You get reminded that, oh yeah, Scarlett Johansson can act, She actually can. And Adam Driver
she's great in two films this year.
is also good. Yeah, they're really, you see them as, Kylo, and yeah, I know Kylo's good, and Black Widow, whatever, but like they're really acting. Shut up. They're really acting in this one. And that's great. I think that this is one that it kind of shows you how, I guess, divorce or this process can the lawyers were my favorite part of this movie. Laura Dern and Ray Liotta can kind of like weaponize people's like love and pain till it can kind of spiral out of control, or get to a place that it maybe wouldn't have if it wasn't so, I don't know, court ordered and formalized, and you get kind of thrust into this confusing labyrinth, and these people, they have your best interest, but they're also exploiting you. It's interesting.
Yeah, so I love this movie.
So it definitely makes you think through that kind of stuff. And I don't imagine this will stay one of my top two favorites of the year, but for now, I've been thinking about it a lot, so it's there for now.
I don't know that they have your best interest. They definitely want to win, though, and that's in somewhat of your best interest.
Right.
Much like Annihilation, this is a movie about a group of people with their own wants and needs entering a cold, unfeeling engine that
Also
has
a
its
bear.
own desires and aims, and someone's going to turn into a crystal leaf lady at the end of it. I love how this movie's staged. I love the idea of playing with theatrical presentation from scene to scene. Her scene where she's explaining the story to Laura Dern, walking off stage, walking on stage. I just think it's really smartly scripted. The changes in tone, sometimes it's played like a farce, sometimes it's played like a really straight, like, mumbled theater thing that, like, oh man, you can only come into this if you find the coffee grinds from my favorite coffee house, and that's admission, baby. And then you change anyway.
I'm so lost in that metaphor, but that's
Sorry,
all right.
I did
assumed he was
I did
referencing
too.
a play that I hadn't seen.
I followed it.
Thank you, Roth. Thank you.
I don't know if that's good for you, though.
No, maybe not. But just the way that was staged, the sound design, the blocking, the way the camera moved and evolved for different sort of theater presentation throughout, I loved. I know that 2-minute scene is going around. Everyone's like, look at this goofy
annoying.
thing. Arlen Lon Harris said, "Oh,
They clipped out the fight out of context.
the fight out of context. Everyone's like, oh, this is a good movie."
Oh, they can't act.
And for one thing, it's really funny to me, the idea that everyone's arguments as their garbage men have failed them. I guess their garbage men were also in iambic pentameter and very well spoken and not horrible messes writhing on the floor screaming, love me. But Lon said something great in the writer's room a couple days ago that will stick with me forever. He said, Arby's, we have the meats. No, he said, no one asks why directors do things anymore. Like that's one of the big problems with Twitter film discourse or just even, YouTube channels, stuff like that. Everyone just goes, I don't get it. This is dumb and weird. Why? No one asks why. And I think Marriage Story is full of director intent and layers. And I think this is a great movie to go, why'd you stage it like this?
I have a recommendation for you. There's a YouTube channel called Fandom Entertainment, and the two critics there tend to ask things like, why do directors do things? So I'm just messing with you. I'm messing with you.
I've literally never watched a video we've made.
No, I mean...
Is what you're talking about the one with the kaiju and puppies?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Oh, that's a good one.
Because that one's good. Solid.
Or it was just The Rock doing an impersonation
Of Marriage Story.
Of Marriage Story. It was great.
I'd watch that.
Yeah, I would too.
I'd watch The Rock and Kevin Hart
I would do the fight.
Adam Driver, Scarlett Johansson fight.
But instead of
Marriage
punching
Story?
the wall, he just destroys the entire thing.
Yeah.
Yes. And then, at the end of the movie, The Rock singing that same song at the end.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No.
I would
I'd watch that.
200% watch that. Man, where were we when there was the junket? John Wick 3
What are we
is
doing?
a movie that, can you make Keanu Reeves not work on a horse? I don't think it can be done.
I don't think it can be done either.
Weaponized horse.
It is a weaponized
Before he even
horse.
hopped on it.
Yeah.
The John Wick series is now, John Wick 3, Parabola.
Yep.
John Wick Chapter 3.
Chapter 3.
Parabellum.
Parabola.
Parabola.
Lorgus Yampos.
Yorgus Parabola. This is now such a cool exercise in how you create a series. It's such a refreshing break from sequel means same thing but bigger and tweaked. The action style from John Wick to John Wick 2 to John Wick Chapter 3, Parabolum, is such a cool evolution of how can we tweak this? How can we do it different? How can we show you things that you did not see in the last movies? They're not all just like increasing body count gung fu. John Wick 3 kicks off with this fantastic, just one of the best hallway fights I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of good hallway fights. Daredevil's given us a lot of great hallway fights, but just this small hallway fight in that's pretty stationary.
Knife museum.
And, in a museum of knives.
Where is that?
It's a
library.
It is.
Basically a knife,
yeah.
With an exhibit on knives.
Yeah.
A knife exhibit.
Naturally.
I love it so much. It starts there. It gives us a horse motorcycle chase that's phenomenal. I think this gets one of my favorite movies of the year for the Halle Berry dog battle alone. It's such a beautifully shot, scripted piece of action. I'm also a sucker for guy with a past / world building that I never actually need to understand. Like, I want them to introduce more kinds of currency into this movie. I'd be completely fine with it. Keep taking me to Egypt and then showing me what does their credit system look like? If you're out of gold coins and is there a plastic assassin card? Is it shaped like a triangle? Can I also stab someone? Do I have to stab someone
your
with it?
accounts by the end of the month?
Exactly. I want to know more about the accountant. Is this a secret accountant sequel? I don't know. Keanu Reeves on a horse fighting alongside dogs and Halle Berry is a real good movie.
It's like mac and cheese.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You can't really do it wrong.
Also, I
guess you could, but they didn't.
They've been so good at casting cool folks that Keanu Reeves has to beat up. Common's great. I think Ruby Rose is great. Everyone in John Wick 3 is just so fun.
The host of Iron Chef America.
Yes.
Yeah. His name I can never remember except
but
he's the chairman of Iron Chef America.
Yeah.
But
if he's like a fan who he fights at the end.
Yeah.
But if you can show don't tell a villain, those are my favorite villains. Where it's like we don't know a whole lot about him, but he's just in his acting choices. You're like, God, I know everything I need to know about this guy, and he's cool. Yeah, great movie.
There were a bunch of movies this year, Dan, that were about movies, about movie making, people self-reflecting on their careers in movies. Two of them I have. One of them you have, Honey Boy.
Honey Boy.
And I think this one is going to get slept on a little bit because it's
already starting a little bit.
Because people are a little Shia resistant.
I guess.
Is my suspicion.
I don't know why. I guess I could see why people would Anyway, that's a whole other thing. Yeah, Honey Boy. Shia LaBeouf wrote it as literally a therapeutic exercise. He was seeing a therapist who said, you have a lot of rage inside of you that's directed at your father, and you've got to get this out because it's eating you alive, because you're in a mental institution, literally, because we know why, because of everything that we saw play out in real life. So he wrote the screenplay, and Alma Harrell directed it, and amazingly, and he, not by design, according to him, he did not intend for this to happen. It's just how it worked out. He plays his own father. Noah Jupe plays the young Shia character. He's not named Shia, but it is the story of Shia and his father, and it is one of the most just. I love when people. It can go really bad or really great when somebody takes filmmaking and like turns it into a personal enterprise. And I think because Shia didn't direct it and didn't intend for himself to play the father, that's why this works so well. But I love when somebody takes cinema and is just like, I don't really care what you think. This is what I'm going to do this.
Release it or not. Yeah.
Yeah. And Alma Harrell really got that, and so it is so full of this deep well of like pain, but also hope, but also sorrow, but also redemption. Shia LaBeouf should be in contention, and Noah Jupe, by the way, both should be in contention for Best Supporting Actor Oscars. I don't think either of them will get nominated, and that's a damn shame. It's just, it is really unique. It is somebody exercising their past demons on film, in a story about themselves that they themselves wrote about their own life, that they then reenact in the villain role of their own life. It's one of the most unique films that I've ever seen. It's going to be one on my top 10 list this year. I don't know where exactly, because there's been a lot of great movies, but I said this in our review. We played our part at Screen Junkies in the whatever image of Shia that had emerged, with the whole art show thing and the bag on the head, and then the getting arrested, and I mean,
and the plagiarism,
the plagiarism, everything, and it really goes to show how. You see something play out in public, and you think you know that person, or you think you know their life, you think you know why they act the way that they do, or they're just crazy. And this shows that, that is a slice of it. And that's one of my favorite things about the movie, is it doesn't spend a lot of time on the Transformers set. It pays lip service to it. It's one shot.
That's very clearly on the set of Transformers.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't pay a lot of time with the getting arrested. Again, it's one scene that sets up the rest of the movie, or the do it or anything like that. He's not interested in revisiting his life in the sense of what He's more interested in exercising this past. I love this movie.
I liked it a lot too. I thought one of the things that was really interesting about it, and I think we did talk about this on Screen Junkies pretty openly, that Shia may end up being somebody like Amanda Bynes, where people would sort of make light, and then eventually we would feel really bad because it would come out that there was a lot more going on there, because of course there's a lot more going on there.
I feel bad.
But I do too.
About the thing that we did with him.
I don't remember what we did.
We went and took a camera into that art thing, and we had our little chuckles and our ha-has, and took advantage of the moment, and we got a lot of views out of it.
I'll send you a link.
Okay.
Yeah. And
I know what we do for a living.
I mean, this is a while ago, but it really did. I mean, I thought about it makes you rethink how you see people and how you think of them.
Well, but I mean, that story is true of literally anybody. Everybody has something that's going on beneath the surface. But one of the things that I thought was interesting about Honey Boy was, even within that, this idea of who's got the right narrative is not totally clear. And I think that's okay. His dad, the way he tells Shia the story of his own life, is the Shia character. Is not necessarily exactly how it happened, but also the way that Shia is telling to us in this film is not exactly the way that it happened either. If you look at the timeline, it portrays an incident with his father as if it had happened when he was alive, but it didn't. It happened before he was born. So I think the way that we perceive memory in our families is incredibly informed by how we feel about it, and this is how he feels about it and his dad. In any event, it's a really, really interesting movie. And you know what else is an interesting movie? The ones that I was going to talk about, which I'm trying to remember now, because there really was a lot of confusion this morning about what we were doing. So I'll just quickly mention that I think that Parasite is maybe our Mad Max of this episode.
Yeah.
Where we were like all going to talk about it, and then no one really did. So you brought it up a little bit. Everyone needs to go see Parasite. I think this will end up at the top of a lot of people's lists this year. It's certainly going to be in contention for Oscar. It is directed by Bong Joon-ho, and am I getting it right? Did I do it okay? Thank you. In any event, it's a family impersonating as kind of workers in this house, to get into a wealthy family's. They can't get work, basically. This family is struggling to get work. They're very, very poor. And so they basically scheme to take over the positions that are available in this household in order to work and then have access to this money. And I won't say too much after that because I think that more ensues, but it's a slow look at the cost of two distinct class distinctions, like too far apart when those that are moneyed are so far away from those that are not, and there is no connection any longer, and there is no real path forward. The consequences can be very, very extreme for everyone involved. And it's also just about how ordinary people, like the wealthy family, they're not jerks. They're just kind of oblivious, and they're really, really, truly in their own pocket, in their own world, and don't see what's quite literally right beneath the surface, right there for them to see. They don't see other people suffering, and it's not that they don't care, they just don't know enough to care. I think that's my interpretation, but that doesn't matter because the end result is the same. It's really, really great. It's somewhere between a horror and a comedy and a social commentary, which is kind of what he does, and it's really one of the best movies of the year. So it's Parasite, and you're going to take it home. Actually, no, there's more for us to do. Just kidding. But you're going to talk about Dolomite Is My Name, which is really fun.
I'll keep it quick because this was just a fun movie. This is as loving of a tribute as you'll get from Eddie Murphy to the comedian turned filmmaker Dolomite. I don't mean to say this to demean the movie in any way, but man, this just really made me want to watch Dolomite movies.
Yeah.
Because this guy, he's like a fun version of Tommy Wiseau.
Yeah.
Like he's just one of these outsider creators who just has a vision and is so undeterred, and like nothing will stop this guy. And they I have no idea how much of this is true or not, but they throw every obstacle in the book at him, and he finds these just fun and clever and just endearing ways of dealing with the problems of movie making and of storytelling and of making a name for yourself and giving the people what they want. I like someone who isn't ashamed to give the people what they want. Dolomite is that man, and it's just a heartwarming story about a guy overcoming all of his doubts, internal and external, and creating something that resonates with people. Just the fact that thing is like the ultimate exploitation movie is funny to me.
It's not even the ultimate. I mean, I haven't seen the original films, but from the way they make it look, it's like a movie that's having fun with that genre.
Sure.
Because it's comedic.
Yes, it is definitely comedic.
So it's more like, I don't know, the Naked Gun of exploitation movies?
Yes, like an X-rated Naked Gun. Sure.
I don't know.
I thought that was what is the
Black Dynamite?
Yes, Black Dynamite.
Right.
Which also still probably the best movie of 2019. Black Dynamite.
There you go.
Just every year.
So I this had a smile on my face the whole time. Snoop Dogg has a fantastic role in it. I thought Eddie Murphy, it's just good to see him on screen having a good time again. So again, I have so many 2019 movies left to see, but for now, that's in my tops.
I think it'll stay there. I just caught it this weekend. I loved it. Another one that was really, really great this year that I think probably is going to be forgotten about a little bit, so I'm glad you brought it up, Joe Starr, is The Farewell, showing that Awkwafina is a real actress.
Yeah, man.
among
I
other
mean,
things.
look, I didn't mean to talk about basically the same movie twice in this episode, but
that and John Wick.
yeah. I mean, the parallels. It's from a writer-director named Lulu Wang. The premise of this movie is Awkwafina, who plays this young woman named Billy, finds out from her parents that her grandmother in China is dying. No one is going to tell her that she's dying, but they are going to move up a wedding that was on the calendar for way later as an excuse for the entire family to go and pay their respects and say goodbye. And it's a movie about a lot of things. It's a movie about adjusting as an immigrant in the United States and then whiplashing back to now readjusting your newly found American values back home with your family. It's about how much grief we can take before it starts to affect our daily lives, which I just found so powerful, and it shows it to you so simply. All of these people are around this woman trying to just smile and sort of take this sorrow and this grief and the choice that she should be able to probably have to experience those things herself, taking them from her. It's almost like the sitcom idea of, like, the guy and the dad in the house in the sitcom being like, oh, well, I'll fix it. It's like, well, maybe it's not your job to fix it. And it's this whole family just being like, oh, well, we'll fix the idea that you only have a few weeks to live by just, like, dealing with it for you. And it starts to break everyone in big ways and small ways. Dinner conversations become suddenly pointed. You see the history of these characters, and there's no giant grand decisions like this grief doesn't trigger off like, oh, well, this traumatic event in our past like is now to light. But just little small problems become big because there's so much on everyone's plate. And Awkwafina is phenomenal in this movie. She's so good. And I do agree. I think this will go under the radar, and I don't think a whole lot of people will be talking about it in a couple of years. But it's just really lovely.
It's doing all right with awards, though, so far.
It's doing okay. The two that I'm worried about this year that'll start to lose traction are The Farewell and Waves. So Waves already has lost traction, which I think that is 100% one of the best movies this year. And everybody should watch it. Watch Waves. Big recommendation. But The Farewell, at least I think what it has anchoring it, because Waves has Sterling K. Brown in a supporting role, and Awkwafina is really anchoring this one. And I think there's something like, oh my God, Awkwafina can act about it, that creates a little bit of interest. But she can. It's incredible. I think you did a great job of selling it. Watch The Farewell. Hollywood loves to talk about Hollywood. And Once Upon in Hollywood talked about Hollywood a lot.
Yeah, but it also didn't. I love this phase in Quentin Tarantino's career, which I was thinking about. It actually started with my least favorite Quentin Tarantino movie, which is Death Proof. I just don't care for that movie very much. I think it's a bit too much of an homage, into the sense that like he recreated a dull genre film so much that his own film was dull. Just my thought. But it started this idea, and he's followed it through on every movie since. This idea of the victims turning the tables, and the bad guys getting their just desserts. And I love that, and it hasn't gotten old. As a matter of fact, those are the movies that are my favorites. His last four, Hateful Eight, Inglourious Bastards, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
Skip Django.
And Django Unchained, are my four favorite Quentin Tarantino films, because it's like he finally found his mission statement, and that's allowed him to open things up in a way that I think is so interesting, to write his characters in ways that are a little more vibrant, in ways that are a little more lived in. I think because he's giving his characters now a mission statement, a purpose, something that they're striving for. But what this movie does so smartly is it tells that kind of story in parallel with, and I think this is almost what this has been culminating to, which is an actual fairy tale. It's called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Hollywood. It's real events and real people, but it's this idea of what if we lived in a world where everything worked out okay? And it doesn't look like it's going to, but then it does. And I think that it is Leonardo DiCaprio. Newsflash, he's a great actor, but he's so pathetic in this movie, and
he's vulnerable.
No, he's pathetic. He's
feeling a little lost.
He's a washed up guy. He the only person he can really relate to is this little girl on the set, where he's just talking.
She owns him. Yeah, he's not relating to her.
Well, no, but he relates. He's relating to her in the sense she's the only person that can get through to him and speak to him on a human level. Even his best.
That is so real of child actors.
Yeah, they see they see the world in a way that other people don't, and it's just this you're going to be on board or you're not, because it is just literally this slice of life in Hollywood, with the twist being you think it's going to build up to this horrible thing, and it does build up to a very visceral events, but it's in this way of saying we live in a world now where ultimately, even though there are terrible things that happen along the way, the people that need to get theirs, and the people that you want to be okay are okay, and that's a fairy tale. That's what a fairy tale is. There's some bumps on the road, and it looks like they're gonna lose, but ultimately the good guys win and the bad guys lose. It's just done in a very hyper-violent, R-rated way. But it's just, I love all the performances in this movie. It's his least plotty movie, which caught me by surprise when I saw it. It is very much just we're going to immerse you in this place and these characters, so that by the end of it, it's not plot driven. It's just that these people. You've seen them driving around. You've seen them on set. It's not necessarily that one event leads to another. It's that it's a culmination of building up an affection for and an immersion into this world, so that when you get to the end of the film, it's such a shock to the system that it works, because I think a lot of people might have seen it coming, but then by playing with the convention of the storytelling, then maybe you don't see it coming. And I just, it's such a unique film, and I know he says he's only going to make one more, but if that's the truth, I think he really hit his stride late in his career in a big way, and I really, really like this movie.
For the record, I think it's one more, and then he changes his name to a symbol, and makes another 10. For the record,
it's just like Batman symbol. Something
I loved, because before I saw this movie, I had heard you talk about his sort of turn to, sort of really, with Inglourious and Django, really sort of turning this revenge film sort of into his new MO, justice for people that need justice. And if I can just spoiling. What I
can do. Tell them you'll do this when you're.
I'll do this when I'm done. Or I'll stop dancing in the corner when I'm done, because I know that's what Zach's looking for. There we go. Something I loved about his approach to that style and that sort of mission statement with this movie is that instead of, with an Inglourious, the Jews get to slaughter Hitler in a balcony, and with Django, I know there was a lot of discussion about Sharon Tate's agency in this movie, but what I saw him trying to do was to just not make this a movie where Sharon Tate turns the tables on the Manson family. It's where she just gets to live a life away from it completely, which I thought was an interesting, just additional twist to the movies that he's been making. That I thought was well intended and sweet by him. That was the read I got off of it. Was he wants a world where they didn't even make it up the hill. They went to a different house. Things went badly, and she's blissfully unaware and gets to make 8 more Valley of the Dolls into a $1 zillion franchise if she wants.
I had questions about that when I saw it too, to be honest. And then I thought about it, and I feel like because Sharon Tate is a real woman and specific versus if you were to make a character that's like an amalgamation character or a representative character, and what happened to her was so horrible.
It would not
have played well to suddenly see her turn around and yield some great weapon.
Agreed.
Or I think it was the better choice to do it this way ultimately. But it is a movie about Hollywood because it's a movie about the things that no one talks about, that as successful as someone is, they're not, or they think they're not, or 10 minutes later they're not, you know. It's an incredibly fickle environment. And that part of it was about Hollywood, and that other part of it was about the wish fulfillment that this woman that had done nothing, it wasn't even the right house, that wasn't even the right people, not that that would have been okay, was brutalized. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Stop
I think
dancing.
that's it for spoilers. Okay, so we're almost there, you guys. We almost did it. Really quickly, because there was confusion today. Pain and Glory is Pedro Almodovar looking back on his life as a director. He's one of my favorite directors of all time. This is one of his most subtle movies and introspective. It's incredibly beautiful, and it's also a love story, and you should check it out. It's one of the movies about movies this year that I think is very worth it. A lot of those, but it's also about movies that a filmmaker that maybe some people aren't familiar with, although I'm sure you guys are familiar with Pedro Almodovar. If you're not,
If you're still watching, you are.
You should be, because he's incredible. The Irishman, conversely, I think is very much Scorsese in a conversation with
Academy
himself.
Award winner, The
but
Irishman.
not overtly. Like Pain and Glory is about a filmmaker, and Antonio Banderas is playing a filmmaker. Essentially, I think Pedro is who he's playing. The Irishman is not about a filmmaker, but we've talked
about America,
this.
Roth.
No, it's about him, I think, in a discussion with himself about
I thought it
how
was
he's
about America.
portrayed violence and gangsters. It's also about America, but it's also about which lives we deem to be interesting and relevant, and which deaths we deem to be interesting and relevant, and a lot of it has to do with faith.
That's another.
In my opinion.
Not to be too old man yelling at cloud, but
Let's yell at cloud.
No, we discussed the whole Twitter thing with Marriage Story. That's another thing I saw on Twitter, which was this thing of just like, oh, Martin Scorsese cast Anna Paquin and gave her 7 lines. Great job. And it's like, that's the point.
That's the point.
Of
Why
the
did he do that?
movie.
Yeah.
Why did he
The
do that?
whole point of the movie and the culmination of the movie is the fact that this guy deprioritized everything that was important to him in his life, his entire life, that there were important figures that were sitting in the background of his life, and the consequences of that. So that's another thing. It's just like, again, like people can criticize films. Of course they can. If you don't like this or that, that's fine. But I hate this idea of somebody says something and I'm going to seize on that idea because, yeah, that is stupid. Why didn't Anna Paquin have more lines in the movie? If you haven't seen the movie, put it in context. Like, it makes complete sense to me.
Yeah.
Why? Like, because even I watching the movie was just like, what, is that Anna Paquin? I was like,
When is she gonna
doesn't
do
have
something?
she doesn't have a lot to say. And then when you get to the end, you realize that like you almost need to have somebody in that role who stands out a little bit as somebody who should have more to do, because that's the point of the movie. And I hate that
I think
idea of just like,
I think it plays multiple purposes to cast Anna Paquin. The first is that you notice her, and you notice that she's his conscience, and you notice that he's disregarding it, and you notice that he's disregarding his life and his daughter, and you associate that with being an important figure and that he's not paying any attention to, which is his child, which is ridiculous. However, I also think the movie is setting up very overtly like this entire investigation into what happened to Jimmy Hoffa, right? Why do we care? Like, it's because Jimmy Hoffa was famous. When they show you time after time after time after time, again in this film, as other people are being dispatched, one in a very similar manner in which you know for sure that body never would have been discovered, and you don't care about any of those people, and the movie's challenging you to ask yourself, why don't we care about all of those people? We only care about what happened to Jimmy Hoffa because Jimmy Hoffa is famous. So when we look at Anna Paquin and we're like, she's going to do something, it's because she's famous.
yeah. Anyway,
Is my opinion.
There you go.
Before we go, I'm going to tell you to see Last Black Man in San Francisco, which is a great film that is written by and co-written and created with Joe Talbot. This is his feature directorial debut with his friend Jimmy Fails, who also stars in the movie, and it's slightly based on Jimmy Fails' life. And it's a movie that is about the efforts of this African American young man to reclaim what he believes is an ancestral home in a Victorian house in the Fillmore district of San Francisco, and is unable to do that. And it's also questioning what we identify as our value in our history and not in our lineage. And it's just a beautiful character story about this man and his friendship, his lifelong friendship with one of my favorite new actors of the year. And I won't say too much more about it, but it's a very, 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 very touching, sweet, charming, funny movie that a little bit touches on the same issues that Parasite does, but does it in a much more heartwarming way. That at the end of the movie, it's just the message of the film is nobody is just one thing.
And it looks beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
Just having seen a few scenes from it, it looks incredible.
Yes, it's great. I highly encourage us all to go see that movie. Any other thoughts before we wrap up 2019?
Oh, my goodness, no. You could have watched one of these movies in the time we've been talking about them.
We didn't even talk about...
Go watch movies.
We didn't talk about The Joker. We didn't talk about...
That'll be the comments.
Well, we'll save that for another video.
Yeah.
There's plenty of more 2019 rants to go on. The year isn't over yet.
Okay.
I'm really hoping the Rise of Skywalker in hindsight ends up on my favorite of 2019.
Sure.
So this
I'm
is
really
what we're
excited.
going to say. We're seeing that.
Tomorrow.
Well, no. Stop it.
Well, yeah.
We've seen it.
Well, yeah.
But when we're playing with time, we're going to see it tonight.
But it's wrapped in lithium old watch batteries, so I'm unable to recognize as to whether or not I love it or not.
Emmy for Watchmen. Watchmen for Emmy.
Yeah. Here.
Bye.
Oh, see you next year.
See you next year. Thank you guys for being amazing. We love you. Are you still watching this? We love you so much.
My arm's getting tired.
Me too.